Live stream video captures the moment a gunman wearing a dark hoodie emerges from a back pew, drawing his gun and firing inside this Texas church during Sunday morning service. The gunshots sparking panic in the pews. Worshipers seen ducking for cover. One man covering his wife with his own body. 6 seconds into the shooting, 2 members of the church security team returned fire, hitting the gunman, dropping him to the ground. The 911 calls came shortly before 11 a.m.
Active threat, 1900 South Las Vegas Trail.
Inside the church, at least 5 other parishioners pulled out handguns and carefully approached the fallen gunman. One man kicks away his gun and picks it up.
It was a sad thing that he had to come into that congregation and hurt people, and it's a sad thing that we had to hurt him.
We're going to need help with patient care.
2 churchgoers and the gunman were killed.
The citizens who were inside that church undoubtedly saved 242 other parishioners.
One woman said her mother, a longtime member of the church, saw the suspect and noticed something was wrong.
The shooter was sitting next to my mother. She knew from growing up at the church that she didn't recognize this gentleman.
Outside, law enforcement secured the area as parishioners, visibly shaken, consoled one another.
We lost 2 great men today, but it could have been a lot worse.
Today, evil walked boldly among us. But let me remind you, good people raised up and stopped it.
This moment is more than just a hug. This is an embrace of comfort and care, and that is what so many families in White Settlement need tonight. Thank you for joining us. I'm Marisa Vedra. Every time we hear about a mass shooting, it is agonizing. But when it happens in a church, it leaves so many of us asking, is no place sacred? Is no place safe? A man with a gun walked into West Freeway Church of Christ in White Settlement intent on killing. He took 2 lives, but it was armed church members who stopped him from taking even more. Chris Lawrence is live at the scene for us tonight. And Chris, the pastor and law enforcement there, they are praising this church's security team.
And for good reason. I mean, Marie, we all imagine what we might do in a situation like this, but you never really know. Not until you're in it, not until that first shot is fired. I mean, we could be standing here talking about 10 people dead, 20 more. So thank God for their quick thinking. And with that in mind, here's what we know right now. 3 people have died, the shooter and 2 members of the church. And at this point, police haven't identified any of them. As a lot of places do these days, West Freeway Church was live streaming their service, so everything that happened went out online. Now, we're going to show you some of that video tonight, but not all of it. It's just too graphic, especially where the victims are concerned. And of course, we're going to explain why the church's security team was able to react so quickly and so effectively. Back out here now, we will also dive into what we have learned about the shooter. You can take a look behind me. You can see there's an incredible police presence still there on the scene. But before we get into all that, I want you to understand exactly what happened inside. Here's Matt Howerton.
Evil has no home. It is everywhere. And on the very last Sunday of 2019,
If evil's going to try to do something horrible, evil's going to do something horrible.
evil found West Freeway Church of Christ in White Settlement.
Nobody wants to get that phone call that, a shooting just happened in a church.
In a nearby parking lot, loved ones anxiously waited to reunite with church members.
He said that he heard the first shot. He took her down out of her chair, and that the shooter was rushed.
242 of them held by police after a lone gunman entered the church and killed 2. A haunting attack caught during the live stream of the church's 10:30 a.m. service. Out of respect for the people inside, we are blurring this video.
We are thankful, Father, for the bread of which we are about to partake.
During communion, the shooter gets up, says something to a member, and right at this moment, he pulls a shotgun, shooting 2 church members point blank before being killed by the church's security team.
All you can do is do your best to stop evil from happening to more people.
John Richardson survived the service. He pushed his wife to the ground and covered her for protection. Down the street,
We're all right. We're all right.
his daughter was happy to see him alive, to hug his neck.
My family is very, very close to this church. They are their family.
But amidst of the heroism, there is confusion A motive for the attack is not known.
We help people. We're here to help people. And to have something like this happen destroys my heart.
The pastor of the church tells us he was going to preach about leaving a legacy before shots were fired. Instead.
And 2 men today left a legacy. But a congregation is going to build on that legacy.
And Matt, a lot of times, when we talk about shootings like this, we talk about the victims in terms of the people who were died or perhaps wounded, but all of those people who were in that church at that time, they lived through this.
Absolutely, and I don't think that this is going to be something easily forgotten for a lot of these congregation members. And you just heard the pastor, Britt Farmer, say that he had a sermon planned out for today. Like every pastor does on Sunday, they go into their study, they come up with an idea to talk about, and it just unsettles me that he never got to say that sermon. And the people that were there today to actually listen and hear and get ready for the new year, for 2020. And there was even a prayer said before communion saying, bless this church with wisdom. Please bless us with blessings throughout the 2020 year. They were all there for that sermon, and it was cut short. And that's what's so frustrating about this. This is a sanctuary. This is a place where you and I could have been. Yeah. Any Sunday, and now this congregation is going to have to get over this. They're going to have to strengthen from within and get moving forward. And the only way they're going to do that, I think, is by clinging to their faith. And just talking with so many of them, I think they're ready to do that. Especially after you hear the pastor say they're going to build on the legacies that these men left behind.
Yeah, very well said, Matt. And I think whatever he comes up with for that next sermon, it's going to be. Boy, you could just imagine how important it's going to be for the people who live through this.
Absolutely, no doubt, no doubt.
Right, thank you very much. Also want to just give you an idea of just the immense response to this shooting. Take a look at some of the video that was shot just in the last hour or two. I mean, you can see FBI agents, ATF agents, Texas Rangers, Fort Worth Police. When something like this happens, it is all hands on deck. And there are really two facets to this investigation right now. One, that you can see there, all the evidence collection that they're doing right here on the scene. And of course, also the investigators behind the scenes who are trying to go through this alleged shooter's background and try to find out what the movements were leading up to this. My colleague Charlotte Huffman has been looking into the shooter himself. Charlotte, I know it hasn't even been 12 hours yet, but so far, what have you learned?
Well, Chris, like you said at the top of the show, the FBI has not yet released the identity of the deceased shooter. I asked the FBI if the shooter is from this area, and they told me that he has been relatively transient but does have roots here. The FBI also said that they are working to determine if he was driven by any sort of ideology. After the shooting, at least 75 churchgoers were bused to nearby Brewer Middle School, where we saw a heavy law enforcement presence, including at least 24 FBI agents entering the school, most likely to begin interviewing the parishioners. We talked to one woman whose mother was sitting next to the shooter when he pulled out the shotgun.
She's the one that recognized that he had a fake beard on and fake sunglasses on, and he had a writing on the back of his jacket. And she knew from growing up in the church that she didn't recognize this gentleman.
Officials say the shooter has had multiple contacts with law enforcement in the past. They said he was not on any sort of watch list, but he has been arrested before in different municipalities. For what, though, we don't yet know. Again, FBI and local law enforcement are working together to determine a motive. We're live in White Settlement. I'm Charlotte Huffman.
All right, and Charlotte, you might think that, the people who survived this attack walking out of that church would hate the person who did it. Some may, we don't know. But I can tell you not all. Some have an incredible aptitude for forgiveness, and we're going to bring you that just not too far from now. For now, I'll send it back to you, Marie.
Chris, thank you so much. We'll see you in just a bit. As we mentioned, that service today was streamed live online, and the entire video is just as gut-wrenching as you can imagine. We do want to be transparent and tell you that after a lot of conversation, we decided we would show you some of it with the goal of giving you a sense of how things played out in this worship space. The video you are about to see is blurred. You will hear 3 gunshots, but will not see the shooting itself or hear the sounds that come after. It is upsetting and difficult to watch. These are our friends and our neighbors, and we want to be respectful to the horror that they lived through and to who we lost. We also know that what this video shows will be central to the investigation into why and how this happened, and also what went right to keep people safe. On Sunday morning's live stream, the congregation inside West Freeway Church of Christ was passing around communion. At the top of your screen, near the center, you see a man dressed in black who's been sitting in this service, stand to take the symbolized body and blood of Christ. He returns to his seat briefly before coming back out of the pew to speak to the man who just gave him communion. We are freezing the video here, just before that suspect pulls out a rifle and fires. We want to warn you, the sound of the gunshots is jarring. A church security guard responds, and we see the shooter fall to the ground as a stunned congregation ducks and covers. It all happens in 6 harrowing seconds. What follows is chaos and grief as the church team works to get help to those hit and move the rest of the faithful to safety. Now, we showed that video to a security expert who trains organizations like churches in how to respond to these situations. He was impressed with how quickly that shooter was brought down, and he noted how church members got down and used those pews to shield themselves.
Getting low to the ground is very, very good. They're out of the line of sight of the shooter. And so a lot of the actions that we saw the parishioners take were instinctive reactions, but the reactions that we train.
Some of those parishioners have been described as heroic. Many were armed, and they quickly reacted. Prasadi explains how a church shooting 2 years ago had an impact on what happened today in White Settlement.
A shooting rampage that lasted mere seconds, thanks to members trusted to protect their church.
2 of the parishioners who were volunteers on the security force drew their weapons and took out the killer immediately. This church had its own security team. They were well trained.
And it's the type of security team Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said they had in mind after Sutherland Springs when they eliminated the fees associated with security teams for churches and other private institutions, also eliminating time spent waiting.
The immediate responder is the most important, the citizen responder.
And there was a second law passed in the wake of Sutherland Springs that took effect just this past September 1st, allowing for concealed carry of guns inside churches. And based on the video from inside this church on Sunday, that's exactly what many members were doing.
And I'm thankful that our government has allowed us the opportunity to protect ourselves.
Senior Minister Britt Farmer's congregation had plenty of armed members. In the moments after the shooting, you can see several with guns drawn and pointed at the gunman who was already down. The new law says unless a church posts clear notification that guns are prohibited, members can conceal carry.
We lost 2 great men today.
Lessons learned from tragedy.
But it could have been a lot worse.
Maybe the reason it wasn't. In White Settlement, I'm Chris Sadeghi.
We have seen too many shootings at churches over the years. As we mentioned, the deadliest was in November of 2017 at First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs. In June of 2015, a gunman opened fire at Emmanuel AME, one of the oldest black churches in the U.S. in Charleston, South Carolina. 9 people lost their lives. And 20 years ago, on September 15th, 1999, a man killed 7 people at Wedgwood Baptist Church in Fort Worth, just 10 miles from today's shooting. We do expect to learn a lot more about the White Settlement shooter and those victims in coming days. Attorney General Ken Paxton will also be visiting that church tomorrow. We will have full coverage on air and at WFAA.com.